Welcome to our third podcast for Esquire Unfiltered.
Esquire Unfiltered.
I wanted to, I have to remind myself, by the way, say like, share, or subscribe, please, to Esquire Unfiltered. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. Again, want to educate you. Primary purpose of tonight is to talk about something that's in the media quite a bit today. If you're not seeing it, I'm frankly surprised because it's happening all across America. And that is the use of federal troops in states that, in some instances, do not want them there. And in D.C., which is not a state, in case you don't know that. But you should know Washington, D.C. is not a state. Andrew, do you know that Washington, D.C. is not a state?
I know.
Okay, so we have 50 states,
I believe
folks.
is it 3 or 4 states that it's in currently?
So they went to Memphis. It was an interesting
I was
sort of.
talking about Washington D.C.
They were in D.C. It was sort of an interesting psychological warfare or whatever they were doing with that because President Trump was doing a lot of tweeting. I say tweeting, he wasn't doing tweeting. If you don't know this already, President Trump's not really on Twitter or X. He's on Truth Social, so you can certainly follow him there. He had the Boston mayor, whose last name I think is Wong, and he also had the Chicago mayor quite afraid that he was coming. And I think he eventually will, but nonetheless, they went into Memphis recently. But it raises a very good point about what we're going to talk about tonight and what you want to get your take on it, and you can ask me any questions because, frankly, this is very complicated. It's old. It's really old law. This is, we're talking about stuff that people don't talk about. And I have been saying for years now to fellow people in society, to patriots, other people, who used the word insurrection before 2021, right? When were you at a pub or a coffee shop and said, did you see that insurrection last week? It was amazing. Like some people got together and they did like an insurrection and it was, it was good. Like it was different than the last one. There was more canisters and smoke. So you don't talk about that. So we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about what it is. I actually found a really interesting article that I'm going to try and give you a link to. Not supporting it at all. I'm just saying it's a National Defense University article written by two people in 2020. Really interesting time frame to be writing an article about the Insurrection Act and the Militia Act of 1792. So with that, I guess we can jump into it. So last week, just as a recap, these kind of segue to each other. It wasn't intentional, but last week I wanted to talk about that case that you were aware about. The people did get charged with defiant trespass and found guilty. We appealed it to the highest court of the land and lost because they wouldn't take our case. I just saw Tom Fitton in Judicial Watch arguing a case this week about elections. The case that I present much more important because remember, as I showed you last week, Help America Vote Again Act, National Voter Registration Act, which I personally litigated here in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. Those deal with elections, but the case that I brought before them was going to deal with everything that dealt with it, not just elections. It would have dealt with, giving money for roads to change the DUI statute or masking kids up using, the ARP Act. So anyway, I don't know. On your further reflection from last week, did you have any questions before we jump into this new, how your federal government abuses you?
No, not really. I got to watch the whole thing a couple times because I'm the editor, but no, nothing crazy came up with it.
Okay. So President Trump is using the National Guard. And why I wanted to do this episode is, and I've done it already with the Patriot Group a couple times that I belong to, but I wanted to do it on this stage in case people want to share it or talk about it. I don't see anybody talking about it. And I don't think you've heard anybody talk about it. Everybody heard about Los Angeles, I think, and Governor Newsom hates President Trump. President Trump hates Governor Newsom. And I actually saw a really hilarious short that I won't talk about it in the show yet, unless we're going to make it more racy, but it's actually a female woman making a really funny comment. At first, it took me a minute to get it, but anyway, so I say it was President Trump shaking Newsom's hand, but she made a hilarious comment about that. So in any event, they do not care for each other.
No.
There's my, in any event, count one.
Yeah, that's one.
So he filed a lawsuit against President Trump when they sent troops into Los Angeles. I have that here. I have one of the cases here. This is called Gavin Newsom et al. Versus Donald Trump et al. On my screen, and again, I'll give you guys some screenshots from this case. I have the Ninth Circuit opinion. The number of attorneys goes on for pages, single-spaced.
Oh, wow.
So it's quite a few people that were involved in this, state representatives, et cetera. So I don't know, 50, 100, 200 people. So, and the question was simply this, like, can President Trump, on his own without Congress, send troops into cities or towns, right? So the answer to the question, according to the Ninth Circuit, is yes. But then it begs the question, as a lawyer, which is what I'm trying to do in the show, is, Greg, what law are they using to go in there? So the issue is the Insurrection Act of 1807, as well as the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's a posse. So if you've ever watched Young Guns or any other Western movie and you said, we're going to get a posse together, that's literally the term they're using here. So interestingly, in my further research today for preparation of this podcast, apparently the reason why they passed that at the time in 1878 was because they were upset because black people were now going to be allowed to vote, African American. The article I read used the word black. Regardless, you understand what I'm saying. These are people that were formerly slaves that were now going to be allowed to vote because of the change in the law after the winning of the Civil War. And I guess the southern states didn't care for it. So they had federal troops there in the election of 1876 with Rutherford B. Hayes, and he won some of the southern states. And it was a big debate because they were like, hey, how did he win these southern states? We think that's not true. In other words, it was sort of like election law all over again, like they're fake votes or something, right? So in any event, there we go. There's number two. Mm-hmm. So that was how it got passed. So what does the Posse Comitatus Act say? It basically says that federal troops, the military, and by the way, they've changed this now to include Space Force. So if you go to the statute, it will show you under Title 10 of the United States Code, it will use the word Space Force along with the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy. You are not allowed to, the president's not allowed to use the military on American soil unless he invokes the Insurrection Act. That's what he has to do.
Which, we're talking about the two pieces of legislation are what, 220 years old and 150 years old?
Yes, one is 1807. And so the article I found is called, I don't want to lose my spacer on this, so we'll try to make sure I have the right page. But it's actually from the National Defense University, which is connected to the military. The article is called Calling Forth the Military, A Brief History of the Insurrection Act, which is really interesting.
We'll link it.
Huh?
We'll link it.
Yeah, we'll link it, yeah. So, and this is interesting. So I want you to think about the southern border and the invasion. And think about how many times President Trump has said there's an invasion. Because this is I would use the word apropos, right? So in Louisiana at the time, now, guys, you got to go way back. I don't know. I hope everybody sees this from 18 to 81. But depending on when you were raised, you should know that we purchased Louisiana in 1803 from the French. I was a history major, so if I don't know, I'm in real trouble. But so it was new. So Aaron Burr, who was kind of a bit of a character, look him up. Very interesting reading about him. Had already killed somebody in a duel at Weehawken, New Jersey, which is near New York. He was gathering troops. But this article also says that at the time there was Spanish border incursions along the new frontier in Natchitoches, Louisiana, along with Aaron Burr, suspected to be gathering troops on a filibuster expedition in Mexico. So Jefferson drafted this himself. I was told that he went to Madison and said, can we use troops in American soil? And he said, we didn't provide for that in the Constitution. Now, why didn't they do that? So this is very, very important. I hope everyone knows this, but if you don't, what was happening in America before we became a country was British troops were here. I think everybody knows that. Everybody should know George Washington was a British soldier. He fought in the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, whatever you want to call it, Fort Duquesne. So here, it's a very
Close by,
yeah, we got,
relatively speaking.
yeah, we've got some, a lot of that history was here nearby and up in New York State. So we had British troops here. They were quartering themselves. So what would happen is, and there's some good shows that cover this. I think there's a show called Spies or something I watched once where they show how British troops would just like come into your house and like sometimes they let you stay, sometimes they kick you out. Like, you need to go sleep in the barn. We're taking over your house for the night. And they would stay there. So as we fought the Revolutionary War, people were like, we're not doing that. So what happened? Well, we created the Third Amendment, which disallows quartering of soldiers in your house, and the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable searches and seizures, which is probably being violated now with data centers, which I hope to cover on a later episode, whatever those things are. So either way, it's a big part of American culture. And this article covers it. This decision that I'm going to read you parts of from the Ninth Circuit talks about how part of American culture was we don't want troops coming into our house without our permission. Not okay, right? So
Right.
Clearly this historical lesson is just boring you. So
I'm just exhausted.
yeah. So so this article talks about that, about why it was originally drafted. Now that's the Insurrection Act of 1807. So, but that's not how he's doing the troops in Los Angeles. So how he's doing the troops in Los Angeles is under Section 12406, which is a different law under Title 10 that involves the National Guard. And in that article, in that section of the statute, there is 3 reasons why President Trump can bring in those troops. And one of those is when it's impeding federal laws, like the implementation of federal laws. And if you guys remember, what was happening was ICE was trying to pick up immigrants in Los Angeles, and people were throwing bricks at them. They were lighting stuff on fire. At one point, I think they had some agents trapped in a location. It's really interesting if you go on to the internet, because I found a League of Women Voter articles about this, if you can believe it. And it says, it's titled, well, what is the National Guard? I think the initial title is What You Need to Know About the National Guard, the Insurrection Act, and Martial Law. So, folks, this article was published by League of Women Voters on September 10th, 2025. Okay, so what are we getting ready for, right? Bear in mind the movie Civil War already came out on, I think Netflix originally. It's on Hulu. That was 2023, I think, 2024. Some famous actors in that. I did not watch it. I watched the trailer many times. I think that's what we're afraid of. I think a lot of people are afraid we're going to go to civil war. So, and here's a League of Women Voters, which, by the way, is some kind of non-governmental organization. So, as I was telling Andrew's friend tonight, we were talking about some other current events. One of the things that I hope to continue to educate people about regularly on the show is you need to know what NGOs are. If you don't know what a non-governmental organization is, you have no idea what's happening in society, because most of what you see in a day is being influenced or affected by a non-governmental organization. I was part of a Zoom call probably a year or 2 ago with folks in Luzerne County, where one of the Rockefeller heirs, I can't make this stuff up, donated into a campaign of a Democratic person in Luzerne County, one county out of 67 in Pennsylvania, over $700,000-$800,000. This one individual woman donated to one campaign in one county, wow, in the Commonwealth, but she didn't do it. She donated it through America First. So look them up, America First, right? League of Women Voters here. So I'm looking at their website. I'm on this article, which is very leaning. It leans one way. It's very much like there was nothing really that bad in Los Angeles. They didn't really need any help, which I don't agree with at all. So you saw the videos, which thankfully with social media, the age of people lying about stuff like that's over. So very tilted article here. So, and again, I'm trying to be sort of the voice of reason and truth here, but this isn't about us. I would strongly suggest that you click on it, look at it. So here's what I do with all NGOs. Me personally, I recommend everybody do it. Always look at the About Us, read their mission statement, their history, and then find the money. All these are funded by somebody somewhere, so find out who their biggest funder, donors are. That's who's telling you the story. And whoever's donating the money is the one trying to tell you this is what you should believe about this situation. So
Right.
that's essentially what it is. Do you understand what I'm saying there, Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, it always comes down to money.
Everything, unfortunately, is that way. So, and here she's talking about Title 32 and Title 10. This article. And I'm not saying the article is wrong about everything. I mean, it does say that the National Guard is a reserve force of military and consists of 54 organizations. So it's interesting stuff. But here's essentially the question and what President Trump seemed to be doing in Los Angeles. And the reason why I'm focusing on Los Angeles in this case is because if you read the history that's in this case, and it's in all of them, the history in the background, there were 700 Marines there. And I don't see anybody saying, from either side, left or right, I don't see Governor Newsom saying that's not true. He's complaining in his brief there were 700 Marines. The defense is saying, oh, yeah, there were 700 Marines. There's no debate there. So the Marines are not the National Guard. So let's be real clear about that. I'm not claiming to be a military expert here, folks, but I mean, we're talking about the military versus the National Guard, which I just read to you the National Guard can be used. If you're older, you remember when they did segregation or desegregation, they had national troops come in. President Bush, the elder Bush, used it in 1982 with the race riots in, I think it was Rodney King, whatever. We remember, people my age. I was 21 at the time. He used the National Guard there because they couldn't get the LA riots under control without the National Guard. So presidents can call them in. However, under this section of Section 12406, it requires the governor. And what it says is through the governor. That's what it basically says. Like you have to call in the military through, which makes it sound like that's how you need to do it. And one of the ways that they explained it in the one case was that Pete Hegseth, I guess there was an adjutant general, and I think I have that quote here. I'll put this up to screenshot. There's an adjutant general that called him in. So that was one of their arguments was we're using this person to call in the military. So let me see if I can find this here for you. The Secretary of Defense's transmittal of the order to the Adjutant General of the California National Guard, who is authorized under California law to, quote, issue all orders in the name of the governor, end quote, likely satisfied the statute's procedural requirement that federalization orders be issued through, quote unquote, the governor. And even if there were a procedural violation, that would not justify the scope of relief provided by the district court's TRO. A TRO is a temporary restraining order, and they're very, very hard to get. I have tried to get one in the vaccine cases. You have to prove irreparable harm, which is one of the hardest things to prove legally. Very, very hard to prove irreparable harm. So I wanted to see this other quote here too, but I'm going to find a different here. So let me go back. I want to read you this. I had this up on the screen too. I have it up here. So this power that the president has, it's basically what the court is calling is he's federalizing the National Guard. So the National Guard is a National Guard, but he's taking control of them as President of the United States because he has that power.
Commander-in-Chief.
Commander-in-Chief of the military, and that's in the Constitution. But he can't declare war, and you knew that when we talked about this on the show. Congress has to declare war, so he can't declare war against France.
Right.
So,
which even running it through Congress is weird to me, but whatever.
Right. So, and we've seen a lot of, Mogadishu, different stuff through the years. Obama did it a ton. Clinton did it, bombings, Croatia, different places. So those are usually considered in the president's powers, and there wasn't really a problem with the media with those. I didn't see League of Women Voters writing articles about it, or NPR or BBC. All of which, if you're not getting it yet, those are left-leaning publications. Pretty much all of them are. So it's really hard to find ones that aren't. You have to find new ones. So you have to find like maybe Right Side Broadcasting on YouTube or Real America's Voice, or you got to read people's podcasts who are not connected to anybody yet, or you can watch this one. So here's another quote from this case with Newsom. And it's kind of interesting, and I want to read this to you so you get a little bit of a flair for it. And by the way, I know I said earlier, like, share, comment. Feel free to comment and ask questions in the comments, and we'll try to look at those and answer them on the next podcast. So then you can watch that one and see what the answers are. We'll have like a Q&A. You can do that. So So Congress first delegated its constitutional calling forth to the president in the Militia Act of 1792. Congress renewed that delegation in the Militia Act of 1795. The 1795 Act was a precursor to the Militia Act of 1903. So you're getting a little closer now, which is a precursor to Section 12406. And like Section 12406, the 1795 Act contained a predicate, quote, invasion, quote, condition, which read this way, quote, whenever the United States shall be invaded or be in imminent danger of an invasion. And remember, President Trump keeps calling it an invasion. I'm going to get to an executive order here in a minute where it's about the invasion across our southern border. It shall be lawful for the President of the United States to call forth such number of the militia as he may judge necessary to repel such invasion. That's directly from the Militia Act. Now, Section 10, United States Code, Section 12406 says, quote, whenever the United States is invaded or is in danger of invasion, the President may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion. Now, is that what he's using? He's not saying that. He's saying that he's using it to enforce the third section, which has to do with carrying out federal laws like the ICE people are trying to take these people, these immigrants. But in this Ninth Circuit case, which is here, and I'm definitely going to give you a link to this so you can read it yourself, that I read parts of it from the Militia Act here too. That's where they said that he's allowed to do that. And the determination of whether those federal laws are being able to be carried out is really within his discretion, which is pretty interesting because he becomes the judge and jury for whether he's allowed to use it. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think it does, but I mean, checks and balances wise, it doesn't really make any sense.
Right, and that's one of the things they talk about here, explaining the president's power to command the militia in times of insurrection and invasion or natural incidents to the duties of superintending the common defense and watching over the internal peace of the Confederacy. Now, that's from the Federalist Papers. So one of the people was really adamantly opposed, apparently, and I want to do more research on this, but I just don't have the time, but is Alexander Hamilton. Not surprising if you know him, he's a bit of a character. And remember, there were, when we founded our country, there were two groups, and it wasn't Democrats and Republicans. They're supposed to be the precursors of Democrats and Republicans. I don't think either of them are. I think it's a uniparty now. I think Democrats and Republicans are both pro-government, period, whether it's state, federal, local. More government, the better. It feels like we're headed toward Hunger Games here pretty quickly. But in any event, that's number 3.
That's your counter right there.
There we go. That's number 3. So, so this is a situation where in the beginning of the country it was Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So Federalists were, very simply, people that wanted to consolidate all the power in one federal government. A lot of people were scared about that because they would just come from England with the king. And they were like, we're tired of having all this power in one man.
Yeah.
And then there were the Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists were people that wanted to put power in the states. People typically like Thomas Jefferson, who wanted Virginia to be run by Virginia, right. South Carolina run by South Carolina, New Jersey run by New Jersey, whatever. So it's with the original 13 colonies. You guys run your own state. By the way, the 10th Amendment is mentioned here. The 10th Amendment is the reservation clause, we call it in the Constitution, where they reserve the rights to the states, which is a really big deal in election law. So, which I've been arguing quite a bit in the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm working on a bill now, again here in Pennsylvania. So that's interesting. So here's President Trump. Let's go to this quickly before I get into some really stuff that'll shock your mind. So President Trump, and by the way, before I get to that, I want to read this here. This is part of Judge Breyer's decision. So Judge Breyer's decision is this one. Judge Breyer's the district court judge. These are usually guys that absolutely positively are trying to write the law the way they want it written. When they can't, they use whatever case law they can find out there to bend it to their will. His concern, like you mentioned, was thus under the Ninth Circuit's test, the president could federalize the National Guard in any number of cases because they federalized it here. So federalizing meaning that the National Guard, instead of being controlled by the state under the 10th Amendment, now the president has control of them. He only got control typically through the governor, but this case said that he didn't need to do that. And we're going to come back to those Marines here in a minute. But just bear with me. This is interesting because there's 4 instances that this judge talks about. like the president relying on IRS data showing that a sizable percentage of corporations and individuals are using tax shelters to avoid paying taxes, he could claim he is unable to execute the tax laws and call in the military. Come to your house. You're not paying your taxes, I guess. EPA studies showing that pollution in a river cannot definitively be traced back into a specific manufacturing plant could claim he's unable to execute the Clean Water Act, which, these are their laws about the environment. But anyway, so
the tax one would be funny because he'd have to call him on himself. I mean, he ran on that in 2016. He was like, yeah, I exploit the tax laws. So do all your friends, all your donors.
Well, he said that was like the biggest boom to Hillary Clinton during the debate. Absolutely, yeah. She was like, and he cheats on his taxes. He goes, I don't cheat my taxes. I'm using the loopholes you created.
Yeah.
But by the way, thank you. Saving in millions of dollars, probably hundreds of millions.
Probably.
Here's the interesting, the fourth thing, and I think this could be really important in the near future. So, 2026, people, there's going to be a midterm election coming. Here in Pennsylvania, if my bill that I'm working on doesn't get passed, this is going to be another bleep show here. We can't X out the word, but it's going to be a crap show. It's going to be terrible, terrible. The elections here are awful. The mail-in ballots, some of them are fake. Some of them are made up of nowhere. We had somebody vote from an address here in our town that doesn't exist. And when the person went to the postal worker and said, where can I find this address? The postal worker for that block was like, there's no house by that number. And I just sent I'm going to put it in this bill, but there were 58 applications requested for mail-in ballots in the year 2020 for people born in the year 1800. Because I know a lady on my block who's 220 years old, and I say to her all the time, the things you've seen in your lifetime, right?
Yeah, enough sunlight and vitamins.
If you just, one glass of wine, maybe a piece of dark chocolate.
That's right.
And I'm not getting any plugs for this, by the way. If you're a dark chocolate manufacturer, though, feel free to reach out to me. The president relying upon anecdotes from state election officials that voting machines are glitching. And I think that's so weird. They purposely use the word glitching. Or that fraud exists, which it does pretty much everywhere, could claim that he is unable to execute the election laws. So is that like we think he's going to do it, so we better just preempt him by saying, if we write it now. So maybe he will. That's an interesting theory that I had not thought of as a way to fix the elections. I think the military needs to be called in. But again, Space Force is part of the military. So that gets me back to the Los Angeles case. So here's what I'm trying to say, folks. It is very clear as a lawyer, from my perspective, that if you look at Title 10, United States Code, Section 251, 252, 253, and 254. I'm going to say that again because I really want people to look at this. Title 10, United States Code, Section 251. We would call it sequitur, but you can keep going there. 252, 253. That's where the Insurrection Act is. If he declares the insurrection, he being the President of the United States, who has the power to do so, like Thomas Jefferson did in 1807, and if I recall correctly, Aaron Burr was hung for treason. If he invokes this Insurrection Act, then he can use the military. But the question is, Andrew, how did the 700 Marines get there? And here's the part that's so troubling. So I've got the decision here from Judge Breyer, who we know is concerned about elections and election law and IRS and taxes, which is kind of a joke. Clearly does not want the president in Los Angeles. But he doesn't talk about the Marines. He talks about it in the beginning, but he doesn't ever get to it. And he actually does. There's a whole section on the Posse Comitatus Act. There's a section on the Insurrection Act. But he doesn't actually ever say he didn't do it. He just says his conclusion is he violated the Posse Comitatus Act. He's saying, no, he's not allowed to call him. He can't federalize national troops. But he talks about the National Guard. He doesn't talk about the Marine Corps. I just don't understand it, because to me, the fact that just that little tip, it almost feels like to me, and I've said this to multiple people now, it feels like there are people out there to see if there are Gregs out there. Like, is there a Greg out there who's watching this closely, who's saying, hey, what do you mean 700 Marines? You can't do that. National Guard? Okay, that's Section 12406. Right. I can look that up as a lawyer. We can debate those three sections, carrying out federal laws, whether there's an invasion going on. Kind of iffy, kind of his discretion. I feel like we got invaded because there's, according to him, 23 million immigrants. Pretty strong argument, but Marines, no.
Well, yeah, you said Newsom's the one that said there were 700 Marines, right?
It's in the, so if you guys don't know this, I'll just teach you now. Let me teach you this part too. And this one does a really good job. There are always sections in these. So here's one called, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the screen, it's called Procedural History. That's incredibly boring to a certain extent. It's procedural history. That's like typically how it went to the courts. Here's the findings of fact. So sometimes there's findings of fact. Sometimes there's a procedural history and a factual history. We have to write these all the time. But they go through in the findings of fact, and they discuss the fact that ICE is under trouble, that there's a thing. Here's the deployment of National Guard section. There's all kinds of stuff. There's little headings. You can even skip forward. Task Force 51, which is what the group was called, that consisted of Marines. So I guess what I'm saying is, Andrew, did the president declare the Insurrection Act? So this is the question that I have myself. So don't feel like if I'm here telling you guys this, that I've got answers to all my questions. You can probably guess I got a ton of them. I don't have answers to all the questions. I got some of my own questions.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm picturing, I know this isn't how it works, and I'm picturing Michael Scott, like, I declare bankruptcy. Trump goes out on a rooftop and declares the Insurrection Act. Right. But how does it actually work?
But I wish we could do that clip. We probably have to get their permission, but that's so funny. If you've never seen that clip, it says he's told he can declare bankruptcy, and he walks outside. He walks in the office. He walks outside the building and just starts screaming really loudly, "Bankruptcy! I declare bankruptcy!"
Yeah.
So not how that works, folks. But very important question. So is he required to tell us, or? And this is the big moment here, right? Drum roll, please. If you don't watch any part of this podcast, however many minutes we are into this. So think I'm crazy. Don't think I'm crazy. It doesn't really matter to me, to be honest with you folks. So did he already declare it? So if so, when? I'm going to tell you. And how? So let's look at the statute, right? I know these are boring, but they're super important. It's not even very long. It's three lines. Like, you guys can look this up yourself. I tell people all the time, look up Section 254. Title 10, United States Code, Section 254. This is what it says, Andrew. Whenever the president considers it necessary to use the militia, remember we're getting this from the Militia Act of 1792, or the armed forces, now we're using the military. Now we are. Under this chapter... So they put it in the chapter of the wall here. He shall, by proclamation, I declare bankruptcy. Okay. Immediately order the insurgents to disperse and retire peaceably to their abodes within a limited time. Okay. So I've did this for a group way back when. I've done it multiple times, actually. Abode is another word for, do you know what abode is? I've told you, you're going to go to your abode later.
At home?
Yeah, you're going home.
Yeah.
So it's another word for home.
Yeah.
Retire peacefully. Disperse. When was a time when the President of the United States, in this case President Trump, told insurgents to go home in peace? Okay, when was that? Do you remember it?
Well, I know what you're going to say. Go ahead and say it.
You don't remember. I'm not going to tell anybody why, because I don't want to get in trouble with these people. We're still getting these J6ers out. But if you were in D.C. on January 6th of 2021, some crap went down, okay? And after that date, we started, pubs, coffee shops, we started saying, oh my God, did you see the insurrection? Now, I think it was an insurrection. I don't think it's the people that were there that were citizens. I think it was other people. And I hope and pray that we'll get those people arrested soon for what they did. It's coming out. If you don't know that already, the D.C. police are already been connected to Nancy Pelosi and the people in the courthouse in the Capitol. Now there's I think they admitted the FBI, there were 78 people or something at plain clothes in the FBI, at least. 70, 80 people there to kind of get people stirred up. Anyway.
I heard it was like 154.
Yeah, it was.
I forget where I saw that. But
huge number. So, and if you believe that, come on. It was a lot. There's a lot of people there wearing I think they're required to wear khakis and the blue shirt, is what we think, right? That makes you a federal agent. That's the joke.
No idea.
That's the joke on Twitter.
Yeah, the joke is they're easy to spot because they're all wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. And
or khakis.
Yeah, and khakis.
Yeah, like Jake from State Farm.
Yeah.
And we're in khakis.
The real one.
Yeah, so on January 6th, 2021, the President of the United States came out and had a speech. It lasted about 59 seconds. You can find this. I'm on this. This is actually University of Virginia, of all places. So here he is. I'm going to show this. I hope people can see this. I'm not going to show the speech, but so I'm going to say this because I've said it before. Why not? Let's just say it. Let's have fun. Let's be critical thinkers, shall we? If you were there on January 6th, I was not. I know people that were. It was pretty dang cold. Somebody that I know that was there said they waited over an hour for the president to come out to speak, not for the speech. Remember, he was wearing a big overcoat on top of his traditional suit, and he had big black leather gloves. Okay, because it was really cold. Now, let's see how many people I can get to do this. This video disappeared off the internet, by my math, for a while. It's back now. This is the University of Virginia website. If you know anything about UVA, very left-leaning, okay? Watch the video. Look for the gloves, because they ain't there. He is not wearing an overcoat. And, folks, it looks pretty darn warm outside looking at that background. So that begs the question, when did he shoot this video that we all saw? I watched it here on this giant TV that you see in the background. I watched it on January 6th. Every station stopped. ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS. They all stopped. They all had to show this video that he said. Said what? He said this. Now, this, I'm not saying this transcript's accurate, but just watch it. The part that I care about is he talks about going home. I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. Okay, later in this, he says, but only a minute long, we have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You are very special. You see what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel, but go home. Go home. They say video cuts off earlier. Either way, I recall him saying it 3 times. At least twice he said, go home in peace. Okay. Did he tell the insurgents to disperse? The answer is yes. And retire peaceably. He said peace twice. To their homes, abodes. He did. And he said within a limited time, he said, you need to go home. You need to go home right now. So, legally, Greg, what are you saying? I'm saying all of the elements of Title 10 United States Code Section 254 were met during that video, period. Did he invoke the Insurrection Act on January 6, 2021? I don't know. I mean, has the military been in control of martial law since then? I don't know. There are certainly people out there on social media that believe that and have put out a lot of information related to that. But there's one instance where it could have been done. Okay? Now, the president himself wrote an executive order. When he became president in 2025, he wrote another executive order. And that executive order was titled Declaring a National Emergency at the Southern Border of the United States. Okay, sounds like Jefferson, right? Natchitoches, Louisiana. So he's even using the same historical language. Now, why am I looking at this executive order? Because it was issued January 20th, 2025.
Oh, wow, day one.
He did a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
Just like he said he would. Yeah. And he revoked about 100 of Biden's executive orders, whether those were real or not, who knows. But either way, he revoked them, which is what the governor of Virginia did when he took over. So, and that's what I tell people all the time, by the way. You can't fix the election with an executive order. You know, I'm with President Trump, I mean, he's fixed a lot of things with executive orders, but it only lasts for as long as you're president, then it goes away. Because the next person come in and with a stroke of the pen, revoke all your executive orders, and then they're gone. But this executive order under Section 6B says, I mean, did he invoke the Insurrection Act? I don't know. It says, quote, within 90 days as of the date of this proclamation, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall submit a joint report to the President. Now, I didn't know at that point. Now that it's Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem, if you don't know that already, to the President about the conditions of the southern border of the United States and any recommendations regarding additional actions that may be necessary to obtain complete operational control of the southern border, very similar to previous Militia Act, comma, including whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. So, critically thinking, if he's saying, tell me whether I should invoke it, he's sort of signaling to regular folks that are willing to read these, I guess he hasn't invoked it yet. But that doesn't mean he hasn't. It doesn't. He's just saying, write me a report. This was supposed to be issued, by my math, 90 days is April 20th, so that was a long time ago. So has he invoked it since then? If he did, I can tell you this with 100% accuracy. This decision and the Ninth Circuit opinion don't talk about it. So that's the part that's really interesting. Like, if he did invoke it, why didn't he just tell the court in the Ninth Circuit, well, I kind of invoked it on January 6th of 2021, and it's been in effect all along. So not saying he did. I'm just saying, did he purposely make that speech the way he did so people like me would talk about it and say, boy, it sounds interesting? I don't know. I don't know the answer. That's why we wanted to do this podcast, just to kind of talk about, like, what the heck is going on, because those Marines can't be used without the Insurrection Act being invoked. So either in January 6th, 2021, or by my math, sometime in this year, 2025, he would have had to invoke it, which my question, Andrew, I think you asked this earlier, was, like Michael Scott, does he just like storm out of the White House and say, Insurrection Act invoked, Insurrection Act invoked? I mean, he made a proclamation. All the TV stations stopped. They were required to read it, like when JFK died, folks. It's the exact same thing. Remember I'm saying this to these folks out here. This young man was not alive in 1986. I was in school. Remember the Challenger, everybody? 1987, I'm sorry. I think it was 1987. Everything stopped at the school because the astronauts thing blew up. So one of the rockets exploded.
It's like 9/11 too.
9/11, there was a lot of... I
wasn't alive for that either, but...
Well, 9/11 was a little different. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing, and then eventually everybody got synced. But initially, someone at our office turned on the NBC show, and yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday. So, again, everybody showed this video, and we'll give it to you to show it to you, but it's very interesting. And what they argue in this case, I wanted to talk about this too, is they say that his action was ultra vires. Very important term. I've talked about it quite a bit, and there's been a lot of ultra vires in our society, and there is in our society that needs to stop. It's a body, typically a government body, exercising an invalid excess or power of authority. So if a government agency doesn't have the power that they're saying they have, that's considered ultra vires. And that's what the EPA decision was in 2022. Super important decision. If you don't know about it, you should. But it basically said that the EPA doesn't have the power to tell car manufacturers, you got to make electric cars.
Right.
Why? Because they're not the Congress. Only the Congress of the United States controls the commerce. Under the Commerce Clause, they don't control it. That was an act of what we call ultra vires. So does all that make sense so far to you, sir? Because I'm trying to make sure I cover this the way I want to. I know I kind of went away and came back to it, but I hope I did a segue back to the...
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
sorry.
that makes enough sense. Honestly, the only reason it started for me is because I can't have this stuff in my face, you know? You're looking at all of it. But
yeah,
we should probably you guys can just look it up. I mean, we'll have the links all below. So, and I'll put stuff up on the screen. But
yeah, and again, I mean, I'm looking at this League of Women Voters again, just to tell you guys, I was part of a lawsuit that involved the elections here. There's a group that was formed by citizens like ourselves, and he went out and got funding from some folks who were concerned about election integrity. It's called the 1789 Foundation. Asked for my help here locally. We filed it. I had another case, and that was Elias Group. Mark Elias Group came in after us on that one. Multiple groups, National Association of Retired Veterans or Retired Pennsylvanians, I think. I even said to my paralegal, who's 60-something, have you ever heard of this group in your life? She said no. The Pennsylvania School Board Association filed an amicus curiae brief for me in another case that actually was in the case we talked about last week. PSBA filed one. So I'm like, who the heck is the Pennsylvania School Board Association? No offense if you guys know them out there. But 1897, 1898, right around the time America got bought and sold, here they come. You know, we got this private group. One of our members in our Patriot group got elected to the board. We got a lot elected. Really shiny portfolio. You should join the PSBA, Pennsylvania School Board Association. But who are they? Just some non-governmental organization, a private group that gets funding from somebody somewhere where they're pushing these things. And they were pro-mask, pro-vax, all that RPAC stuff. They were pushing that crap. They're total control. They want all control in the school board, and then they want the school board controlled by the state government. So, again, that's what it's all about. And that's kind of what I'm trying to educate these last two things about how the government controls your everyday actions that you need to know about. Because how can you fight something? How can you fight an enemy you don't know about? And how can you fight an enemy that you don't know how they fight? You can't fight them if you don't know how they're even fighting. Like, how are they controlling these people? Once you know, then you can start attacking them. You can start finding out, does my state representative take money from the Pennsylvania School Board Association? I'm going to ask my state representative why they do that, and what do you have to do to get that money from them? Right. Why is the League of Women Voters, endorsing you? Because it looks to me like they're pro-government too, and they're saying things like it wasn't really that bad in Los Angeles. Very, very strange. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about. We're going to give you guys some links to this case. I think it's a very, very important case because right now they're going into Portland, if they're not already. They just went into Memphis. That's how we started. You said where'd they go? They went to Memphis. They were in D.C., which was one of the deadliest cities in America. And he's telling us we're going to clean up the city, but he's actually cleaning up the cities while he's there. He's doing like police power stuff. Why? Because the police isn't doing it. And if you guys don't know, go back and look at even the leftist media was covering Portland, not accurately, but there was sections of city blocks there that were controlled by random people. And I think it was Antifa or whatever, which again is a non-governmental organization, Black Lives Matter, NGO. They're all NGOs. They're all non-governmental. You need to know this. You need to be paying attention to it. Mark Zuckerberg purchased all kinds of influence in the 2020 election through CTCL, the Center for Technology and Community Life, right? Who are they, Greg? Why do they matter? Because they bought Rock the Vote. If you're my age, you remember like MTV's Rock the Vote. They'd have like a big check on the screen back when kids watched TV, like regular TV or cable TV. He bought it. He bought Rock the Vote. So, and guess what? Rock the Vote gets access to all the voter rolls for free. They don't even pay for it. Wow. If you ask for it or I ask for it, we're going to need a lot of money. We're going to need like $600, $5,000. You can't get, or you got to sue them, which takes a lot of time and effort. So just again, lots of groups out there that are like this, that people need to know about, that are influencing your elections, influencing how your society is run, and they're influencing these Congress people. I just watched a video last night on Tucker Carlson with a representative talking about how, they pay people, how they get people caught with different, compromising situations, and then people come in and use those. Those people typically are with non-governmental organizations. So anyway, do you have questions about that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
With that, I will tell you guys again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. Mm-hmm. You can contact my office. The number's on there. The website is www.staplaw.net. Follow me on X, Twitter, at Stapler LLC. You can follow me on Truth Social. I'm on there, Stapler LLC. You can see me as Greg Stapp. I'm on Facebook too, individually, and as Stapler LLC. You can follow me individually too if you want to have people doing both. I probably post a lot more stuff on my individual website because I'm a little more racy there. But yeah, I post a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about. As soon as I find out about it, I'll let you know. And it's really just things that trouble me. Mm-hmm. I get troubled. Mm-hmm. I saw something troubling about stuff we're seeing with the vaccines and these vaccine manufacturers recently, and or possibly President Trump making a deal. I'm not sure. So I'm keeping an eye on that. You have to be thinking critically these days. And as Professor Vardaman would say, which I always took his advice, was have a cold eye and a warm heart. So be very skeptical, but once you're sure somebody's okay, well, then you can have a warm heart and be good. But just, have that cold eye. We're not doing that anymore. We're too gullible. We've been dumbed down. We need to be smarter about what we're reading, what we're hearing. And sure as heck, don't believe everything you see on the first blush. If you believe it, that's not right. You want to get at least 3 sources, if not 7. And the good news is on Twitter, places like that, there's both sides. There's left and right, so you can look at both. You can see videos from both and try and figure out which one you think is the accurate one. Mm. I don't know. Do you do that with your social media surfing? No. You don't look left and right?
Well, I'm not looking at a lot of political stuff these days. I'm clearly going to get back into it with this podcast, but there's also, I follow a few people on Instagram that there's one guy, I forget what his Instagram is called, but he will break down an issue from a leftist perspective and a right perspective, just to say like how each side would talk about a certain issue going on. So I'm going to follow stuff like that. And there's dedicated news sites that have, left and right sources to show for stuff. It's cool stuff. I also watch a guy on YouTube, Channel 5 News. Not affiliated with him, of course, but he does lots of like independent journalist work. It's pretty cool.
Well, Catherine Herridge is really doing a lot of great work, and she used to work for CBS. I've followed her on Twitter for a long time. She went down to Guantanamo Bay, did a whole thing there. Guantanamo Bay is huge. Begs the question, why the heck has it been increased in size in the last 2 decades? What are we getting ready for? So we'll see. I'm not sure. Last night I was watching, my phone just popped up Nuremberg. So for those of us who do what I do for a living, which is fight these vaccine injuries and other things, the idea of a trial coming out, or Nuremberg coming out on November 7th, which is a movie about the original Nuremberg, is very exciting because we're actively praying and hoping for a Nuremberg 2.0, where people will be brought to justice who murdered all these people. And again, they're my clients, they're people that came here to me for help, and their loved ones are gone, or they're seriously injured. In fact, one of the people carries around an oxygen tank every day. I see him on a regular basis. Very upsetting. Tried to kill him, failed, but permanently injured, carries around an oxygen tank. I've had a lot of people like that, more than you know. We'll be doing a lot of podcasts about that too. Eventually, we'll talk about it. So with that, we'll sign off.
Yeah. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment.
Thanks very much.